Wow. It's like Easter in here right now. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Leicht. I am, as Pastor Peter said, I am normally the worship leader here. But today I have the privilege to kind of take a little bit of a different role. I want to introduce you to my family. My family's up here on the side screens. This is my wife, Paige. Paige and I, we have been married for 4 awesome years. It is by far the best decision that I have ever made. I don't know about her, but by far the best decision that I have ever made. This is our beautiful daughter, Kate. Kate, I know. Can I get an awe? Come on. Kate just turned 1 this week on Memorial Day. I mean, a year. Holy cow. I mean, she is like the cutest, perfect, tiny little human that the Lord created. And I'm not even biased, okay? I mean, look at those dimples. That's like double trouble right there. Now, I know some of you know Kate, and we get the comment, Kate's serious. She's so quiet all the time. Let me show you what Kate's really like. Yeah, she's like a ripping pterodactyl in our house all the time, okay? That's what she is all day long. You can't even talk on the phone because everyone's like, what is that? That velociraptor in the background? That's my kid, okay? But, I love Pastor Peter, his wife Tiffany, the whole Goweski tribe. They are one of the most authentic families that I have ever been around, and I'm honored to serve alongside them every week here at Hope City. So on behalf of Peter, Tiffany, I want to say welcome to Hope City Church, that we are so glad that you are here with us this morning. So a few weeks ago, Peter sent me a text message. Here it is up on the screens. It says, Matt, I want you to preach at Hope City. I don't really get what the exclamation part is, but I'm not going to lie. When I got this text, you can see May 1st, I kind of panicked. I was a little freaked out. For about 6 months or so, Peter and Tiffany have been hinting of, Matt, we're going to get you to preach at Hope City, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, bro, no. No. And so, I had kind of just brushed it off. And so you're probably wondering, well, how did you respond to this? Because this is a direct ask. This is no subtle hint. This is all direct right here. So, I handled it like any true millennial would, and I just ignored him. But those of you who know Peter, he's not an easy guy to ignore. He'll send you a bunch of arrows pointing up at the text, right? Did you see this? And I'm like, go away, right? But somehow, sure enough, some way, I really don't even know how it happened, but I had committed to getting up here. And in all seriousness, I told him no, flat out no, at first, because I truly didn't think that I had anything productive to say for 30 minutes. I could never do that. And they're like, you preach in between songs. I'm like, that's 30 seconds, okay? 30 seconds, and then I could hide behind a guitar and sing. But 30 minutes, come on, bro. I could never do that. I could never do what he does in writing and preparing and then delivering a sermon. Here's the thing about Peter, and this could be why I was so intimidated at the very beginning, is Peter is one of the most intentional people that you will ever meet. And I think that's why we were so blessed to have him as our pastor. As he's so intentional. And he goes over word for word what he's going to say from this platform every single Sunday. He writes out word for word what he's going to say. So he doesn't get up here and wing it. Or, I can't believe I actually said that. He's not that. So he's very intentional, word for word, and then there's me. And sometimes I just don't think before I talk. You can ask my wife, Paige. She will tell you a bunch of stories. Allowing me to preach may be one of the dumbest decisions that Peter has ever made. So on that note, let's talk about money and politics, guys, right? That's what we do in church. I'm just kidding. We're not going there. No. But isn't it crazy that we all have something in our life that we feel like, man, I could never do that? For me, that can be a lot of different things. That could be from me getting up here every week and singing and playing guitar. I don't even read music. To literally this moment right now, preaching a sermon. Come on, this is crazy. I'm still a little this is a dream, praying for the rapture to happen. This is crazy. But I wonder what it is in your life that you feel like that you can't do. I could never do that. And maybe that's public speaking. Like getting up in front of people, I'm going to tell you right now, it's hard. Okay? There's a reason why it's the number one fear. Or maybe that's starting a new job, a new career change. Like that's scary. And those circumstances can be very overwhelming. Or I know all of us parents in the room can agree with this one. How about surviving the newborn stage? I mean, can I get an amen from somebody? Come on. So as I said before, I have a beautiful 1-year-old daughter, Kate. And man, after becoming a dad, parenting is hard. And I've only got one, and she can't even talk back yet. But parenting is hard. And I remember when we brought Kate home from the hospital, I've talked to other young parents in here, and you get that breaking moment where you're like, oh no, what did we do? Right? And so, you leave the hospital, and I remember Paige and I were leaving the hospital, and we have Kate in our hands, and it's all like, yeah, you're going home, and I'm like, they're allowing us to take this breathing human with us. Like, there's no instruction, there's no manual. You get home, you're like, okay, I guess we're home, we're on our own now. And it took a little bit, but we had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea. And then we started to get into a routine, bedtime routine. You give Kate a bath. Paige and I would get ready for bed. Then I would get Kate all dressed and give Kate over to Paige. Paige would feed her, and then we'd slip her in the bassinet. And you know the saying, when the baby sleeps, you sleep, right? Yeah, we learned that real quick. And so we would ever so quietly tiptoe into bed, and we would peel down the covers, and we would slip right in, and Kate's in her bassinet next to us. And then we pull the covers up, and then it happened. It happened. You'd hear her start to make little noises. And you're like, I promise you, I've never prayed so hard in my life. I'd be like, God, please just give me 1 hour. Give us an hour. You know what? Let's do 10 minutes. God, let's negotiate on this thing here. Give me 10 minutes. And, you all know what happens. She wakes up, and you got to start the routine over and over and over again. And the saying that the days are long, but the years are short, that couldn't be more true. Especially after celebrating my little girl's first birthday. The year is gone. I'm like, man, I got more grays. That's why I put the hair gel in. Otherwise, it's all gray up here. I could never do this. It's so easy. When you're in those blowout diapers and the rut and the sleep deprivation, it's so easy to think, wow, does it ever end? I'm still in that, by the way, so you can keep praying for me. Does it ever end? Yeah, when they start eating food. Whew, good night. We've all been in different ruts in our lives. Maybe yours is that you feel like you wake up, you get your kids ready for school, you bring the kids to school, you come home, you do laundry, you pick the kids up from school, then you get dinner ready, and then you go to bed, and then what? You do it over and over again. Or maybe you don't have kids and you're not doing the kid routine, but you feel like all you're doing right now is you're getting up, you're going to work, you're coming home. You get and over and over again, and it's so easy to think, is this routine that I'm doing right now, am I even making a difference? Does it matter? It amazes me that we could believe that we can't or we couldn't live a life that matters when God created us for that very purpose. But the reality is that many of us feel exactly like this. Does it matter? There's a guy who had every reason to believe that his life wouldn't matter. He was sold into slavery, thrown into prison, and then in a strange twist of events, he was asked to rule all of Egypt during one of the biggest famines the land had ever seen. I'm talking about the story of Joseph, found in the book of Genesis. Now, let me give you kind of the backstory on Joseph. Let me tell you about our boy Joseph here, all right? So Joseph was born into a family of 11 brothers. I grew up in a house with 2 brothers, so there's 3 boys. 12 boys, bless your soul, Mom, 3 of us, okay? But 12 boys in a house, and you thought you had family problems, okay? And so Joseph, he was a little different because he was his father's favorite son. He was his favorite son, and his brothers, oh man, they hated him. They're like, man, you're the golden child. You're the golden boy. We hate your guts, man. So one day, his brothers are off working in the family business. They're shepherds, so they're in the fields tending sheep. And Jacob, their father, Joseph's father, he says, hey, Joseph, why don't you go out and check on him? Time out. So you mean to say that all of his brothers were off working, and Joseph is sitting at home, just being the golden child? No wonder they hated him, right? Come on. And so he goes out to check on his brothers, and his brothers see him off in the distance, and they're like, man, we hate that guy. And they hate him so much that they're like, let's kill him. Like, we're going to kill him, and we'll tell Dad, like, some wild animal beat him, like, ate him, and all this stuff. They had this whole thing planned out. Until one of them was like, no, man, let's not kill him. Let's at least make money off him. Like, come on. Killing him, we don't get paid for that. So they're like, let's at least make some money off him. So what did they do? They sold him into slavery to a man named Potiphar. And so Joseph, he was apparently this, like, really smart, intelligent, and really good-looking dude. And Potiphar eventually puts him in charge of his entire household. And Potiphar's wife, she took note of all of this, and she kept trying to get him to go to bed with her. And so while Joseph says no every single time, Potiphar's wife, she was angry with him. And then she claimed, hey, your slave, Joseph, he's trying to sleep with me. And so Potiphar has no choice but to throw him into prison. And this is where I want to pick up Joseph's story this morning. So Joseph is in prison with these two guys, a baker and a cupbearer. And they both have these dreams that they didn't know what they meant. And so they bring their dreams to Joseph. So let's jump in and see what happens. This story can be found on Genesis in the Bibles around you. It is Genesis chapter 40, page 29. I love the book of Genesis because I was never good at that whole Bible drill thing in Sunday school where, like, they say a chapter and you have to speed to it. But, like, Genesis being the first book, like, I got that one. I could do that. So Genesis is the story of the beginning of creation. It's the beginning of what God was speaking to humanity. So let's jump in on page 29, chapter 40 of Genesis. And it says this. It says, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night. And each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, why do you look so sad today? Well, we both had dreams, they answered, but there's no one here to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. And you know what Joseph does? He tells them exactly what their dreams meant. That the baker, unfortunately, the baker was going to die in 3 days, and the cupbearer was going to be restored to his position in the palace. Don't you think it would have been so easy for Joseph to ignore them and their sadness and their request? Like, he could be sitting there thinking, I'm in prison. Like, why does my life even matter right now? Like, I don't care about these guys and their bad dreams. I'm living a bad dream. Why should I care about my neighbor's problems when I've got problems of my own? But what we learn from Joseph is circumstances don't dictate your future. Circumstances, they don't dictate your future. Joseph did not let his circumstances of being sold into slavery and thrown into prison take him away from remaining faithful to God and pursuing the plans God had called him to. In this moment, Joseph could have been saying, like, I can't keep doing this. Like, I'm almost 30 years old and I'm in prison now. Like, I can't keep doing it. Who would blame him? But circumstances don't dictate your future. And your current circumstances, the place that you're in right now, doesn't impact necessarily what God could do through you in the future. When Peter texted me and said, hey, I want you to preach, like, I had every reason not to. I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually a full-time realtor. I volunteer here at Hope City like many of you do on the Dream Team. I volunteer and I lead worship every single Sunday because I love to do it. I'm not a pastor. I'm a realtor. I have a 1-year-old girl. My wife and I, we love to eat cookies and milk at night. Like, come on. Like, we're just normal people. I had every reason under the sun of why I could have said no. And yet there was something oddly enough that felt like, I think I need to do this. I think that my circumstances, they can't dictate my future. As much as I wish they could have in this situation, trust me, I'm here today largely because I was unwilling to let that happen. And Peter he's such a great leader, and he was pushing me hard, and he was like, no. Like, we need to hear your voice, Matt. So let's jump back into the story. Joseph is sitting there in prison until one day Pharaoh has a dream. So these two guys had a dream, and now Pharaoh has a dream. And so verse 8 says, in the morning, his mind, being Pharaoh, was troubled, So he sent for all the magicians and the wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard, and we told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he had interpreted them to. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. So Pharaoh, he sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh." So Pharaoh, he's got this dream, all right? And his dream, he had a dream of cows. Cows. 7 fat ones and 7 skinny ones, and he was totally confused. I mean, I feel like we would all be a little confused. We wake up, we had a bunch of cows in our dreams. And so he was so confused, and he goes to Joseph and he says, "Hey, I heard that you can interpret these dreams." And look at what Joseph says in verse 16. He says, "Yeah, I can't do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." In this moment, don't forget, Joseph literally just got out of prison. Like, he just shaved his face and everything and just got out of prison. And the first thing he says to Pharaoh is, "Yeah, I can't do that, but God can." And so Joseph went on to interpret the dreams that Pharaoh had, and the dreams were that the 7 fat cows would represent 7 years of abundance in the land, and 7 skinny cows would represent 7 years of famine in the land. You see, Joseph's life had not been going well up to this point. He had been rejected by his family. His brothers wanted to kill him. Became a slave. Then was a prisoner. And yet he still remained faithful to God. And he didn't turn his back on God because of his circumstances in life. Instead, he pushed forward knowing that God had called him to bigger things. And listen, I know that some of you this morning in this room feel that same pressure, or are feeling that God has called you to something bigger than what you're currently doing. And I want to tell you that God has he has not put you in Sarasota on accident. God does not have you at your current workplace by chance. But there's a reason why God has you where you are, and you're still kind of feeling like, man, what's going on? Like, what's going on around me? When Paige and I first got married, we were living in Orlando. She was a elementary school teacher, and I was working for the UCF athletic department. And here I was asking my new bride to move across the state to a place where she didn't have any family and had never lived before, because I was going to come back home to Sarasota to start selling real estate. And I'd never sold real estate before, and I don't know if you know how it works, but if you don't sell a house, like, you don't eat. Okay? So, I mean, there's no pressure or anything like that. But here we are moving. Paige didn't even have a job yet. We're under contract buying a house. I'm going to a career that I'm like, I don't even know what's going to happen now. And, I mean, you want to talk about being a little bit nervous and the fear of the future and the fear of the unknown? Like, all of our friends were in Orlando. Like, our community was there in Orlando. Like, our life was there. And sometimes circumstances of life can feel overwhelming. But yet, Paige and I, we still felt like we needed to come to Sarasota. For me, back to Sarasota. And in fact, for all of you who are discouraged today because you felt that same sense of God is calling you to something, but he hasn't fully revealed it. See, we see in Joseph's life that your future is not limited by your past. Your future is not limited by your past. Let's see what happens next to Joseph. In verse 41, it says, "So Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt.' Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, 'Make way!' Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt." See, Joseph's future was never limited by his past. I mean, come on. He was a prisoner who then in one moment became in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Like, can you imagine, like, going from like a stock boy to managing the entire chain? It would be like Nick Foles, second string quarterback, defeating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. And unfortunately, yes, that did happen. It's still a very sore subject in my family. So go Patriots. But really, so often I see people say, I could never impact the next generation, because when I was their age, you don't know what I did. Like, you don't know the things I did, the people I dated, the crowd that I ran with. Can I just tell you a story about my childhood real quick? So I grew up here in Sarasota. Is there anyone else in here, by show of hands, that grew up in Sarasota? Oh, there's more than I thought. But we are like the unicorns of Florida. We just don't exist. Okay, they don't make them like us. So one day I had a GoPed. A GoPed is a motorized scooter. Okay, so I'm in middle school, right? Every middle schooler needs a motorized scooter. Of course they do. And I got off the bus, and I was riding the motorized scooter, this GoPed, in our neighborhood on the sidewalks with a helmet, doing everything right. And there was this motorcycle cop. Well, the thing with motorcycle cops is if I wanted to try to, like, outrun him between houses, like, he can fit where you fit. So, like, you're going to have to stop, okay? So I stop. He walks up to me, and he goes, "Do you have a license?" I said, "I'm 12. So he said, "Do you have a license?" Which I said, "I'm 12. You have to be 16. Like, don't you know this? Like, you got to be 16 in Florida to have a license. I am 12. Like, let's do the math here, okay? And so I kind of got this piece of paper thing out, and I'm like, my heart's pounding now, right? Like, oh, I'm in trouble when I get home. And so he made me walk it home. So I'm walking it home through the neighborhood. My friends are there, and like they're looking like, oh no, what did Matt do now? Like, this is not good. And so walk home, and my dad was outside unloading his truck from a day of work, and the officer goes up to my dad, and he hands him the ticket. It's like a lottery ticket, not really though. He hands him the ticket, and he goes, "The court date's on the back." And my dad goes, "He's 12. He's like, "Yeah, well, there's a couple different dates, like with school scheduling, but like the court date, like you can pick these couple different dates." And my dad's like, "He's 12. So yes, I was a 12-year-old. I was in court. I got a rap sheet. Check me out on Google. But here I am preaching in a church, okay? But when we come back to Joseph's story, it doesn't stop here. When we pull up verse 46, it says, Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years, again, the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentiful. So Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt, and he stored it in the cities. In each city, he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Do you know what Joseph was doing? He was preparing for the future. In fact, Joseph reveals to us point number 3, if you're taking notes this morning. He reveals to us that we need to make decisions with a goal in mind. We need to make decisions with a goal in mind. Now that Joseph had interpreted Pharaoh's dream and knew a famine was coming, he made decisions with a goal in mind, and he lived with intention. In those 7 years of abundance, Joseph was very intentional with his decisions because he made sure to save enough grain. That way the people wouldn't starve when the famine came. Where have you been intentional in your decisions? Have you been intentionally planning out your financial future? Have you been intentionally raising your family? But not only raising your family, but leading your family? Because the decisions you make today will be the stories that are told tomorrow. The decisions you make today will be the stories that are told tomorrow. When you look at the life of Joseph, he never made a decision based solely on himself. I mean, looking back, he served people constantly along his path. Even when his life wasn't together. I mean, I know so often We say, well, my life's not together. I don't have the perfect house, or, I want to have more kids, or the perfect car. So, I can't do these things. Joseph was serving the Lord when his life wasn't together. Even when his past showed all of this chaos, he continued to stand faithful and pursue God's calling. Joseph, he understood that the day-to-day circumstances he faced didn't dictate his future. Instead, God did. Joseph knew that God's plans for his future would not be limited by the problems of his past. And he knew that when you live life with intention and make decisions with a goal in mind, the stories you tell tomorrow will be the ones that were written by God. In February of 2018, God had rocked my world with the passing of Paige's grandfather, who I had come to know, and we called Paige's grandfather Poppy. And I had known him for several years now. I actually had met him before I even knew who Paige was. And he had truly become my grandfather too. So Paige and I, we made this trip back to Boca Raton, which is where she's from and her family is, because Paige's grandfather he's on hospice care at home, and we knew that this was going to be the last time that we were going to see him. And I personally had never lost someone in my life that I had been so close with and had such a close relationship with before. And as we spent time as a family that weekend, so many people throughout the community, they came to visit him. And one word continued to resonate in my mind. One word: legacy. I couldn't get over this word because that's exactly what Paige's grandfather was leaving behind. See, he had impacted his family first and foremost, but many people beyond his family, throughout his community. I mean, one thing that Paige's grandparents decided to do years ago was to take out an additional life insurance policy that would leave their grandkids a small inheritance. I mean, you want to talk about living with intentionality? So after Paige's grandfather passed away, the thoughts of this blew my mind. That they had thought to live so intentional years ago. So that way, not only their kids would be taken care of, or their grandkids, but their great-grandkids, because what we were able to do with this small inheritance was start Kate's college fund. Great-grandkids. And living with intentionality. And you know that living with intentionality sometimes is hard. And it's not easy. But Paige's grandparents, I've never seen more people live with so much generosity, so much intentionality, and with a goal in mind. And it's unfortunate that Poppy was never able to meet our daughter Kate, and that's why we named her middle name Poppy, was after him. And so what I realized in this moment is that his impact, it wasn't over a course of days. It wasn't over the course of when he was home on hospice care, but over the years of his entire life. Like he made the conscious decision to walk with the Lord, and he chose to impact people around him, and he chose to invest in his family, and he chose to leave a legacy. When I stood back and I watched the celebration of life for Paige's grandfather, it really challenged me that the stories that I will tell tomorrow, or that my family will tell tomorrow, are based on the decisions that I make today. And as I said earlier, those decisions can be hard and not convenient, and you don't want to do them. My future is based upon my faithfulness to God, not on my circumstances, not on my past, but on my willingness to trust in Him and commit my life to serving Him and make intentional decisions that paint a future that only God can. I mean, here I am. 4 weeks ago, almost to the date, right? May 1st. 4 weeks ago, after Peter asked me to preach. And, we're coming in on the end of this, and man, it feels good to almost be done. But I'm telling you, we need to be willing to make decisions with a goal in mind. You might be saying, well, Matt, you don't know my past. Yeah, you're right. And it's because of your past that God has a special plan in your future. Your past matters, and yet it doesn't matter at the same time. Your past influences who you are, but it doesn't prevent you from becoming who you could be. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Every person can make a difference. We talk about this all the time here at Hope City. See, the decisions you make today determine the stories that are told tomorrow, guys. Maybe at home you can do a better job of investing in relationships. Be brave enough. I say that word. Be brave enough to invite people over to your home. Paige and I, we went out to ice cream with Peter and Tiffany in early of 2016, and it was the first time. Yeah, it was the first time that the four of us have really sat down. I had met Peter just a few times, like in passing, like a handshake, and Peter was talking to us about this idea, and this idea of potentially like planting a church, and Paige and I were like, man, like that sounds cool and all, but like, are there going to be people that are our age, like that we can connect with, right? Like, because like keep in mind, we had just moved from Orlando and now to Sarasota, and we were really looking to have that community and friends and doing life that we left in Orlando. And that's when Peter and Tiffany challenged us, and I will remember this till the day I die. They challenged us that we may need to be that connection point for someone else. And I was like, well, that stinks. Right? Like, it's not about us. Like, so often I see people that come into church, and I've been on staff at a lot of different churches, never did this whole thing. But, people walk in, and it's all about them. I didn't like that song, or it was too quiet, or it was too loud, or I didn't like what pastor said, or those kids' crafts, like those just weren't that fun today. Or it's not about you. And so that's what Peter and Tiffany were reminding Paige and I of church isn't about you. Like this whole Christianity thing, it's not about you, what you can get out of it. And so, I was like connecting with people, like, you mean like we have to be brave enough to invite people over, and we actually have to go home and clean up our house, right? Like, I'm just kidding. Those of you who know my wife, Paige, know she's one of the most organized people ever, and I am so lucky and blessed because of it. But we could say, but what if they don't like our cooking? Or what if it's just plain awkward? Like those awkward silences, right? Like, what if it's just plain awkward and we can't make conversation? Paige and I knew that if we wanted to connect with people, we were going to have to put ourselves out there. And that's hard to do, especially when we were comfortable being at home and eating our milk and cookies at night. I mean, it's good. It's good, right? But listen, you can do this too. Do you know how easy it is to jump in and start making an eternal impact here at Hope City? The Dream Team, it makes it so easy. The Dream Team is what we call our volunteers here at Hope City. Between the hospitality, the kids, the roadies team, the tech team, and the worship team, which if you play things, we're looking for people, so, we'll talk after. Like, it is so easy to jump in and start making an eternal difference here at Hope City. And can I be honest with you for a moment? Let me be direct. Every Sunday, I stand right over here. And when the set list is done, I walk down this ramp, I take a right, and I go through these double doors, and where's it spit you out at? It spits you right out at the pre-K room. And man, you want to talk about intimidating? Like, kids are scary, man. Like, those pre-K kids, like, they'll eat you alive. I think it was last week, I was walking down there, and I was like, I could never do this. I could never do that. People are like, I could never sing. Like, well, if I'll do that, then I'm 5-year-olds, right? I could never do that. But you know what? I am so thankful for what those Dream Team members do every single week, especially in my life in the nursery. Not only does it give my wife a break, but Kate doesn't understand. She doesn't understand what's happening right now. But one day she will. See, I see a community of people every single week that love. They love my daughter. They genuinely love my daughter, Kate. And they speak love and purpose into her life, even though she doesn't know what's going on right now. They do it every single week out there right now. These volunteers, these Dream Team members, They're making a lasting, eternal impact. Sometimes they might get in that rut and feel like all I'm doing is holding a baby. Or all I'm doing is helping a kid's craft or something like that. But you are leaving a legacy. And all of us, you can do that too. Can you imagine what it would look like if we began with the end in mind? Can you imagine what it would look like if we didn't let our past circumstances dictate what God wants for us in the future? What would your family look like? What would your family look like if you decided to be more intentional than you already are at parenting your kids? What would it look like if you were more intentional in planning ahead for your financial future? And at the end of the day, you made all of your decisions based on these two commands, which is what Jesus says are the greatest commands. And that's to love God and to love others. God has a purpose for all of you. He has a story for each one of us. And man, I can't wait to see what that is here at Hope City. Let's pray.